No, then I can't see it all. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to Bytes with your host, Doug Truitt, Head of Revenue Success at Reynolds United.
Hey, guys.
And myself, John DeRelay, Revenue Management Expert at Wheelhouse. And we're going to be continuing our trend of having 20 to 40-minute conversations about revenue and distribution topics in the vacation rental space. So welcome to our 5th episode, already at 5. We're making pretty good headway, and we've been hearing some good feedback, so we hope you're enjoying it. Today, we've picked a topic that we find really fascinating and relevant. We're going to be talking about opinion matters, which is going to be a conversation about reviews and review strategy and how reviews impact your revenue strategy. But before we get started, let's start with our joke KPI. Doug, take it away.
Yeah, so this one was fun. Reviews obviously is a huge piece of everybody's business, or it should be at least as far as consideration. So the joke KPI I came up with this time is a little bit of a longer one, but AKRPL, which stands for the average Karen reviews per listing. And I say that, and I apologize to anybody who has the actual name of Karen out there for that, but it's obviously a trend that's out there in social media and everything else with going on. But it exists in reviews too. I mean, at Stay Alfred, I remember several reviews. One of them was like, the square footage of the unit. They actually measured the square footage of the unit when they got there, and it was 5 square feet less than what the listing said. And it was just like, you got to be kidding me. And they were wanting a full refund, give a 1-star review, all this stuff. But there are reviews and there are stuff out there that exists like that. But
yeah, it's one of those things where if you got a high AKRPL score, you have to either reassess your operations, or maybe you got to consider doing a whole rebranding and just go for really nitpicky kind of self-absorbed customers.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get started on our topic today. Reviews. Well, we kind of already got started, but we'll go a little deeper into the review thing. And let's just start at the basics. Doug, what is so important about reviews? Why should we care?
Yeah.
Other than just being irritated when we read them when they come in, what's the deal here? Why is this important to us at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there really wasn't a review consideration at Stay Alfred in the early days. Until we started realizing there's got to be some kind of impact to the performance of either the listings or the conversion of the revenue management, that kind of stuff, the likeliness to book or something. And I think the biggest reason that reviews are important that we found was just it gave you a lot of insights if you were paying attention to it on what is actually happening at the property. And you kind of have to take a lot of that stuff with a grain of salt, right? I mean, some of the stuff people are just being, like we said, they're being Karens or being really nitpicky or whatever, but there are some stuff that necessarily isn't. I mean, it's if you can find a way to look at your data at a property and see that the same kind of topic keeps coming up, cleanliness or word clouding or something like that, you can actually make educated decisions to invest in certain aspects of the operations of that place, or the physical layout, or what's going on, or how you're actually displaying or advertising it. So that's one of the biggest important places, because it's actually something that's really you can try and improve and make better, both at the digital impression level and as well as the actual deliverable. But from an actual revenue perspective and a distribution perspective, I would say it's super important that you're getting your reviews as fast as you can. Meaning all of the channels, and everybody's heard me talk on this on our podcast a lot, as well as other areas. I've talked a lot about the search algorithms that the channels have and what they consider, and reviews is one of the ones that they consider. They consider not only the score of review you have, but how many reviews you have. And in some cases, on some channels, they actually take in consideration the response rate, how much you actually respond to reviews that actually deems a little bit of a boost, or how you get in the search rank algorithm. And so I think it's important that you consider learning about what channels do from a review perspective, of giving you what we used to call front-facing scores. Booking.com at one point lowered the barrier to getting a front-facing score, or that the listing actually got a review score from like 5 reviews needed to down to 3. And it was a big change because it was that much faster that you could get higher in the search rank algorithms and you build up more confidence. So I think that's some of the main reasons that are important, why reviews are important. But obviously, we'd love to hear what you think too, John, and what's important about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is we know that these big OTA channels, they utilize reviews in their algorithm for showing your property. And in some cases, like Booking.com and Expedia, there's a little bit of crossover between like review and star rating, but you can filter by that, you know? And so understanding how your product's advertising is being affected by your review status is really important and has a direct link to your revenue production. Secondary to that, I also think that using it as an insight tool is really, really valuable. I got a Stay Alfred story. We got a lot of Stay Alfred stories. We'll probably run out in a year or so, but
Probably.
There was this one story where we were looking at the reviews for these properties in Portland, and occasionally a review would come in. It was like, the property was great, everything was beautiful, location was fantastic, the fishbowl's a little dirty. And we were like, what the hell are they talking about? Like fishbowl. So we ignored it, of course. You know, we're like, okay, these people are just crazy, whatever. But it kept happening. Like people kept referring to this like dirty fishbowl until eventually one of our staff members went down there, and it turns out our cleaner we allowed them to do some of the decoration back at the time. They had put like a fishbowl in the units and nobody had ever cleaned it. And so there really was just a dirty fishbowl in the unit. And as soon as we took that out, those reviews stopped occurring. Luckily for us, that didn't impact our, people were having good stays and reviewing us well, but that feedback you get, maybe not so funny, is really important in understanding if there is recurring issues that are either leading to refunds or leading to people not choosing your product that are fixable by your team. And being aware of what's going on in your reviews and having that feedback loop is really important. In terms of how do they affect pricing, Doug, what is the link between reviews and pricing?
I think the link between reviews and pricing really start at like when you're onboarding a property and you're starting a new acquisition of a property or getting it going. I mean, because we know that search rank is so important to getting conversion on properties and getting them going. You know, you have to get enough of those reviews to get some of those components, right? And we've talked about it before, but most channels use in their algorithm some form of your pricing, your competitiveness of your pricing or your performance or your velocity of what you're getting, your conversion, and then they use your reviews as kind of like the main 3 items that really determine kind of search results, ranking and whatnot. And so if you have a new listing and you don't have enough reviews for the channel to have given you a front-facing score, then you're going to get downplayed in that. So when you get your reviews, like we at Stay Alfred, we set goals to get 5 reviews on all the channels as fast as we could when we onboarded a new property. And the reason for that was because the conversion could go up. So if you knew the product was awesome, it was like, you know, what Jordan or others used to call first location, best location, known to man. And you had these great units and it had great furniture, great branding, had a good amenities, all this stuff. But if you didn't have it high up in the search results and you planned out this really good rate plan and you thought this is really worth this and the comp set and the area is this and that, you couldn't necessarily get that rate and you couldn't get the conversion to return on what you maybe made some margin estimates on, like that investment of that property, because you couldn't be seen right away. So I think it affects pricing in a way that is mostly from the conversion standpoint of what you're after. I know that, we used to do the ramp up or whatever we would call at Stay Alpha when we tried to get going, and we'd start, units off really, lower prices to try and help incentivize bookings. And then as soon as, the property would get like 4 or 5 reviews, get those 5 reviews for a front facing score, then obviously the rates could go back up a little bit higher because it would actually start to return a little bit more conversion and impressions from the results. And so, I think maybe we can touch on it a little bit later too with the strategy, but we had a program called Chief Giver of Opinion, or CGO, where we actually utilized influencers and friends and family and stuff like that to go stay at the properties and help us get the reviews up, and give their honest feedback. So I would say that's probably how I would say it affects pricing the most.
I definitely think onboarding is a major aspect, but I think it's much broader than that. So in terms of onboarding, you basically, we know that reviews, they're opinions, and even as a consumer, it's an opinion, but there are some credibility things that occur from reviews, even bad reviews. Like for one bad review is still almost better than no reviews at all. Because we're still, even though this industry is getting much more legitimized, we're still in a place, especially with Airbnb's ease of entry, where there's still trust issues. You don't know if this property exists. You don't know if it looks like what people said. And reviews on there are evidence that someone has been to the property at least, especially on channels that require transactions for reviews, which is pretty much all of them. Booking.com, Expedia, Airbnb, VRBO all require you to have booked through the platform to leave a review now, right? So that right there is important. You need to get reviews on there so that anyone who's looking at your property isn't stuck with the question of like, man, this seems too good to be true, especially when it's new. If your rates are lower, it may seem too good to be true. And if you have reviews, you're giving people confidence that the product at least exists. I mean, it's crazy that we still have to talk about that, but in this world of e-commerce, but we still have to talk about it. But I think the broader aspect of reviews for a revenue manager is really important, because poor reviews are going to reduce your conversion. We know that you're not going to show up as much. People who get to your page are not going to be as willing to buy it. But for a revenue manager, it is impossible to quantify the effect of poor reviews or an unoptimized review strategy on your future revenue. And the most difficult aspect for a revenue manager is you may have done all this great underwriting and you kind of know how a product should perform in the market. But when your product's advertising doesn't reflect your assumptions, or maybe it actually is actually reflecting what the product actually is, which would be unfortunate, or there's some things that you need to fix in terms of your operations, that the impact on your revenue is impacting your future revenue, which you can't quantify. So every reservation you miss out on today changes your booking pace for future dates. So now you may be like, okay, we can fix this review situation. Well, that means you can fix the issue, but then you need future guests to now report back to other consumers that that issue is fixed. And throughout that entire period, you may have to have reduced rates all the way in the future, which means you're selling under an ADR that you would otherwise think you should be able to capture, or you're limiting your demand because you're holding your rates for that to be fixed, but the booking window is changing, which means the amount of consumers in the funnel is always going down as time goes on. That's not totally true. Further out, there's probably nobody and it increases, but you are impacting your future revenue by identifying that you have unoptimized reviews today. And how long that occurs or what that equalizes to is not ever clear to the revenue manager. So you're putting your revenue manager in a position where they have to make decisions about how far in advance they need to mitigate the risk of not selling that product because the product's consumer performance doesn't match your internal projections for it.
Yeah, I think a really key point of what I heard you say back there too was, a bad review is better than no review at all. And that's a really interesting thing to say, because having a review is better than no review. It doesn't matter about what the score is. And just because it's perceived as a bad review, meaning the person gave you a 1-star review and it was because, and you read the context of the review and it's like the sheets were wrinkled, but that's all they gave. That perception for that person was, this is a horrible thing. I gave it a 1-star review because I can't stand wrinkly sheets. But for you as the viewer, potentially looking at something, you'd be like, oh, 1-star review for wrinkly sheets? Okay, whatever, not a big deal. This place looks great. I love the pictures, love this, whatever. Or if there's other reviews, you can read through them to see what other things are in there. But a bad review may not always be a bad review. And then on top of that, the other interesting part to that and the component that I really strive for with the review team that I managed at Stay Alfred was, we need to respond to every single review. Even if we don't have a solution saying, hi, we're going to give you a 10% discount or whatever, response is huge with those reviews, whether they're positive or negative. Specifically, if they're negative, if you show that you responded, and all the reviews on the front side usually have timestamps. So it'll be like, hey, this person stayed with this property on this date. And the review, they'll even show the review date when they put the review in there. And if you can show as a property manager that you responded to the review and say, so sorry you had a bad experience, we'd love to chat with you more about this, please get in touch with us, or we'd love to make this right for you. And you leave it at that, even though there's not a public solution, at least the timestamp shows, wow, these guys responded within 24 hours of that bad review getting submitted. It's like, wow, that company is on top of it. They have somebody there, they're attentive, they're aware, and it really can help build a lot of confidence, because that's what you're trying to do with your distribution, is you're trying to build confidence that and integrity of people to buy your product.
I totally agree with the responses. Particularly for reviews that are challenging, it's important to have a detailed response or a personalized response, not just a stock response.
Yes.
Address their concerns, show that maybe the solution isn't there, but
no
reiterate the concerns, talk about them, because people are going to read that stuff, and especially if you have the capability to say things like, "Hey, we hear you. We're sorry this happened. We sent someone to go fix this." Those things are really helpful. In addition to that, as a revenue manager, when you are seeing those reviews kind of come in, or someone's identifying them and you suspect that it's impacting the property, you have to be in a position where, chances are, if you're the revenue manager, your response is going to be like, well, we're going to have to lower the rates for maybe the whole next quarter. Because you need to do two things. One, you need to find what your price purchase point is, and that's really hard to do based on quality, which is subjective, instead of based on normal quantitative things like what's the market doing, what's my occupancy. Like if your pace is interrupted because now there's a quality problem, very, very difficult to come up with an exact numerical value to that. So what you're probably going to do is you're going to drop the rates for a period into the future. And to further complicate that, you need to, especially if it's a fixable problem, you need to bury that review, which means you need to get more reviews, which means you have to have a higher occupancy, which means you may further reduce the rates in order to drive that occupancy and ensure that the price people are paying is a good value, so that they're more inclined to leave you a good review, even if you couldn't fix the problem that is showing up in the reviews. So your impact on revenue ends up potentially being a significant impact, not only on ADR, but on ADR for a significant period forward. So as a revenue manager, I think, it's one thing to be responsive when you're seeing these things. But when you start thinking about your high season, you should be orienting a focus in the company on your review situation in the season prior to your high season. Because if you're already halfway through your booking window for high season and your reviews are damaging your pace, you're not going to fix that for your high season. You're going to lose it. And so if you know that your high season is in summer, in January or Q4 or Q1 is probably when you need to be reviewing your review situation and implementing the strategies to adjust that, because it's going to take you time. It's going to take you time. It takes multiple teams or coordination between operations, marketing, revenue to correct some of those. And if you don't leave yourself the time to do it, you're going to miss the optimal booking window, which is where it's going to affect your revenue.
It's amazing too, because like when you think about like a lot of people out there think about like case studies, right? And they look at case studies for various topics or discussions or whatever. It's like a review really is a case study on your property. It may not be very detailed. Some of them are. I mean, God, I remember some reviews that were like books. They're super detailed, super oriented. Some of them weren't, but people need to treat those as like case studies. I mean, it's a case study on your property. And the more facts and the more references basically you get for that case study on your property, the more the people can make an educated decision about booking your product. Because they have found that people will look on average through like 25 reviews on a property if it's available before they start to kind of fade away. But they will look through those reviews and look for those things. I mean, and going back to like leaving some kind of comments, I know I was joking, but no robo, comments or responses. But I mean, simple things like, I know it's day off for our review team, and we had, I think we had like almost like 500 or 600 new reviews coming in every week. And so it was kind of hard for a team of 3 people to kind of respond to all those reviews. But what we did is we created a series of like a library of different things that could be done. It's like, okay, well, I saw in this review, it said cleanliness, or it said Wi-Fi or maintenance or whatever. And then we kind of came up with a script of quite a few different options that accommodated those specific subjects and didn't make it like it was a robo, or an automated message, but it gave assistance and speed for our team to be responding to those reviews. And the goal was to respond to them within 48 hours. In order to have that really expediency and attentiveness that people want to see. I mean, things like saying, thank you for taking the time to leave us a review. It really seems that we missed the mark on your stay, and we really truly apologize. Please let us know, or please know that we have made notes of your comments and we pass them on to the local team. Like that kind of stuff doesn't sound automated, but yet it came from a scripted place. But it really helped bring it back to the client. And we're not speaking necessarily to the client in that instance. You're speaking to the potential people looking at your product to book it forward.
Absolutely. And I think there's an interesting thing that is unique among vacation rental channels, right? Because they're listing level and because we have this, ability to create a lot of listings. On the hotel channels, usually the strategy is bury bad reviews, like just generate more reviews, right? Especially if you have room type listings. But with like an Airbnb or a VRBO, sometimes you have to make the decision if it's better for your product to start a brand new listing. And it's a really interesting prospect because in some cases you don't have to close the old listing. In a lot of cases, there may be a point, well, we know with Airbnb already, they kind of force it. Like their review system is really set up around like, oh, you review each other and you have to be above a certain point with no nuance. You could have great reviews, but they gave you a 3 because it rained. People will do that. You can't get mad at people. Like some people view reviews as like, I'm going to review this product. Other people review it as I'm going to review my experience. And you don't have control over everything in their experience, right? Like I was in a mood, so I had a bad stay.
My oceanfront property, it was red tide, and I'm giving you a 1-star review. Like I can't control the ocean. Come on.
But that's probably still valid from the consumer's standpoint. They're like, I paid all this money for a stay and I had a bad stay. It may not be your fault. And that's just the nature of asking people for opinions and then having channels based things on opinions. But, I think especially a good example of this, like, should we start a new advertisement? It doesn't just come from bad reviews because it comes from momentum. We talked about like getting these reviews, like you get a little boost when you create a new listing because you don't have reviews. So they boost you, but that boost runs out. And if you haven't built the traction on that listing, which is especially hard on key level listings, it may never appear again just because you didn't get a review in the 3 months that it was new, because maybe it was booked on a long-term stay or just whatever. The person didn't leave you a review, and now that listing's just buried. And so you may be in a situation where we opened a bunch of similar listings at Stay Alfred because we used room type level listings. And what we would do is usually about 10% of those would produce like 90% of the revenue, right? And they just snowball. Like once a listing starts going on those channels, they just keep going, right? But then you have all these other units with listings that have no reviews and have no production. Well, what's the best thing you can do? A couple times a year, look at those listings and just kill them and make a new one, because now you get the boost and you're giving them an opportunity to build the momentum.
Yeah, I think in line with that too. I mean, there's one thing I forgot to mention, which you were talking about. We're talking about burying the reviews, and the one thing to consider is two pieces to that. Some channels don't show reviews based on the timeline of when they were submitted. Meaning, you would think common sense would say, all right, the most newest reviews are the ones that they show first at the top. Booking.com doesn't do it that way. Booking.com uses some kind of algorithm that I could never figure out, that basically is kind of, it defaults as like, I think it's called relevancy, or it's like relevant. And it'll have reviews at the top that may have been submitted a year ago. But for whatever reason in their algorithm, they've considered it relevant. Maybe it's the quality of the review or the amount of detail or something that's in it or however it is. But we can never crack it. But then other channels will use most recent. So it is relevant to be able to bury the review, but in any form or fashion, adding more reviews or launching a campaign to get more reviews will help put more concentration of reviews in the list somewhere that people can find other stuff about it. Whereas if you just have a couple of bad reviews and that's mostly what you have, or the mix of your reviews are more bad than good, then obviously that's what people are going to see most of. And so There's that aspect. And one other thing to it too, just for thought out there, did find out that Booking.com actually deletes reviews after they become 2 years old. So if you have a listing that is more than, and it's not like it's, oh, it closes it out for the previous month or the quarter or whatever. It's like to the date. So if it's 2 years ago, if it's 2019, July 22nd, 2019, and you had a review submitted on the day, right now it's already gone. It's not on your listing anymore. So every night they will sync it up and they'll get rid of things that are 2 years old. And it's neat that they do it in a couple of ways. One, it's because of relevancy, right? 2 years ago, the property may have had different furniture, different accommodations, different processes, maybe even a different owner. You never know. But it's nice that they get rid of it because it allows you to potentially get rid of bad reviews in the past. They were bad. I know that it also is another thing to think of for some companies out there, not a lot. But when you're acquiring properties, say you acquire a company and you take on stuff, you can actually transfer the existing listing to yourself. And when you do that with working through Booking.com or Expedia, you can get the option to keep the reviews that were already there. Or you can actually wipe it clean and start over and take all the performance, metrics that were of that listing to help your search rank, but start clean from the review perspective. So there's another strategy there for those unique opportunities.
Yeah, I think in relation to that kind of relevance thing on Booking.com, so I believe it's still available, but Booking.com has some really interesting tools on their extranet that analyze your reviews, and so I think they also collect some internal feedback as well, and so they look for consistent themes in reviews, and I imagine what they offer up is stuff that's relevant to themes that are still consistent in your reviews, but they probably choose like better written and better content ones. But you can look and see, like, so you might see a review that seems kind of old and you're like, how is this still relevant? It's really kicking me in the shins. It might be because it's probably because the things that were said in that review are still being said either in internal or external feedback on your current reviews. And so they're keeping that one there. So you can go into the back end and look at what some of those themes are that are coming up in your reviews to help you identify. It's particularly important, I think, when you're thinking about, like, are these things that people are saying solvable from an operations perspective? Sometimes they're not, like you can't change the location, but I think that's something really important.
But if you have contract cleaning or you have like contract third party, like boots on the ground kind of thing, or whatever you have, like you can change those things out. I know that from Stay Alfred, there were several times where we had just really, really bad cleanliness scores and detailed. And some of the reviews actually allow you to submit pictures too. And some people would submit pictures of like just dirty beds, dirty linens, dirty floors, and it would be like this one listing would just keep getting all these types of things. And then we give it to our operations, VP of operations. They'd take it down to the local level. And then they'd be like, oh, well, this is the housekeeping staff that we hired or the company we did. And it's like, okay, we're firing that company and we're getting somebody else now. I mean,
when heads roll.
It's a good thing because it's like your business is very important from not just generating the revenue, but also creating great experiences because it affects your brand. And if you can hold that accountability and make those changes, like it just makes you more of a solid, integrity type of brand and company that people want to be a part of.
Yeah. And I want to point out that I think that people probably in this conversation particularly are thinking like, oh, how does this relate to revenue? We're talking a lot about distribution or marketing, but this really goes to something that we talk about a lot, which is the interrelated nature. And, as a revenue manager who's led a revenue management team, I got to tell you, if I suspected something was not right because we're not performing according to expectations, I did not train my team to go ask marketing or ask distribution if something could be the problem. Pretty much as a revenue manager, and I think if you have a revenue manager, they should be able to do this and should be encouraged to do this. The first thing we always checked is the guest-facing listing, because so your revenue manager should know your way around your listings, because there's a number of things. Like our revenue managers, you're the first one who's going to see if there's a performance issue, because it's up to you to solve it. And so, a lot of the time that might be rate or length of stay or demand, but we always went to the guest facing listing because one, something could be broken. And so we may not be the ones to fix it, but we're just going to check. We know what the rates should be. We're going to check the availability because we're looking at that. Two, when you're looking at that, you look for inconsistencies like, hey, that policy doesn't seem right. Or why do we have this rate plan here that doesn't, I don't remember doing that.
Or that minimum length of stay setting. Or
yeah. Or why is Expedia adding the 10% off sign-in thing that I thought I turned off? So your revenue, even though these are like, the person who's going to solve this and be the expert may not be your revenue manager.
Right.
But if you're a revenue management leader, your revenue manager should always be trained to be checking the front end distribution side, because I guarantee you a large portion of your issues are going to be solved there. And you might very well prevent yourself from doing something which is like, oh man, we're not performing, better lower all the rates, when the issue is not actually your rate position.
Yeah. I think you and I were on Jesse DePinto's Clubhouse thing yesterday, and one of the things you talked about there is like, what you do today as a revenue manager really is like, if you're trying to fix things for like in the month, for the month, or even in the next like 30, 60, 90 days, you're probably not going to make an impact that actually is going to really, really make the kind of impact you want. So
you can lower the rates.
You can lower the rates. That's about it. But right now you're looking at things that really you're going to have the most impact probably 90 days from now. And so that's like a really good point that you say, like, the revenue manager could be the first person that identifies an issue, but they aren't necessarily going to be the problem solver. It's going to be like, hey, distribution, hey, marketing, did you know that like there's like 5 reviews at the top that all mention that the Wi-Fi doesn't work or something like that? And it's like, okay. Or it's like operations, cleanliness, whatever it is. But it's like you said, like that should be a go-to move for any revenue managers. Go look at what it looks like to the customer and what it is, because that will shape a lot of why maybe things aren't performing the way you want.
Yeah, you kind of have to be the town crier and the coordinator. You're like, it's up to the revenue manager to come up with a hunch about what's going on in the market, and you got to say, hey, I have other properties. I don't think it's a market thing. I think it's property specific, or this is what I think is happening. But then you have to bring the teams in who actually have the capability to solve it and coordinate with them.
I will empathize, and I know you can more so than I can too, John. But like, I will empathize with all you revenue managers out there that are listening or may ever see this. But like, it's not an easy thing to do to go and tell people like, hey, this looks messed up. Like, this needs to be fixed or whatever. Like, I know it's not always received very well, and it's always kind of received as like maybe you're passing the buck or something like that. But it's super important, and you just got to find the right way to deliver it and work with people. And I know John and I are going to be, we're going to be at the DARM conference in Charleston. And one of the things that we want to try and talk about to the people is, preventing silos from being created. And that's meaning marketing, revenue management, distribution, even tech, really working together towards the same goal. And this I think definitely addresses some of those needs to be talking, as departments, getting together, talking about review scores, talking about what the distribution looks like, talk about what your rate plan target goals are for the next, 2 quarters or whatnot, and really making sure everybody's aligned and looking for the right things to fix.
Yeah, I mean, you could, a really good solution is to like coordinate meetings between your teams and know when you're going to talk about this stuff, know when the seasonality is right so that you've established time to talk about it. Another good strategy is to buy a box of donuts and put them on your desk, and then message in Slack your marketing and distribution teams, be like, hey, dude, there's donuts. Like, you want to come get one? And then you trap them. And then you tell them, hey, I was looking at this listing. I got it pulled up right now.
You have to get those really big apple fritters that once they take a bite, they can't really like swallow quickly. And then you can get everything out before they can say anything back, right?
Yeah. So let's I mean, it's totally true though.
Biscuits and gravy. Biscuits and gravy. That's what you got to do. Forget the donuts. Give them biscuits and gravy. They won't be able to talk. They're just so full of like bread and gooey gravy, sausage gravy.
So we have a couple other questions here, but I think the one there's kind of 2 we can choose. I'll let you choose, Doug. One is, what are some of the different channel related stuff? Alternatively, what are some tips for revenue generation? That's really what I want to touch on, because I think you're really a master about this. And because we have to touch on channel specific stuff, it is important. But what are, let's assume we've got some of these other things in place. Your revenue manager knows what they're doing. How do we solve the problems that we've identified? How do we generate reviews?
I think those 2 questions or 2 topics are kind of intertwined, really. I mean, and the reason why I say that is because, I spent a lot of my time trying to crack the egg of the reviews with the channels. And it was really funny back in the early days. Like the channels were really clinging tight to like reviews and them asking clients for reviews, you know, and it kind of like trying to take client ownership or guest ownership of those bookings and stuff. And it was just kind of like, well, I'm the one providing the service. Like I'm the product, I'm the inventory, and I'm providing the service, not you. Like you provided the booking, you provide some of those, you know, little teaser of like, hey, your stay is coming up or whatever, some of those nurture path things. But so what I ended up doing and figuring out after attending some conferences and talking to a few people, buying some drinks and kind of bribing some folks, is that
donuts.
They're donuts, steak dinners. But there's links. And if you spend the time and really drill down, go make a booking for yourself, pay the commission, go back into your PMS and adjust the rate down, and all you end up paying is the commission of the channel, and see what kind of nurture path the OTAs give you. And I'm not saying any of this in a way that like violates anything with the OTA's policies or anything. What I'm saying is find out what your customers actually go through. Document and keep a copy of every email communication you get, from the inquiry phase, if you have to do it that way, to the booking confirmation, to the teasers a couple days before your stay happens, to the in stay, and to the post stay. And try to see what kind of content the channels are sending your customers, because what you can do is like booking.com, you can actually find the link that they actually send to the customer that routes to their account, where they end up saying, hey, go leave us a review on this property and tell us how it was. And the reason why this is important, and we built a whole structure around this, is that we built a system at Stay Alfred that would say, okay, reservation was this channel source of booking.com. And when it did that, when the guest was checking out, we would identify they were a booking.com customer from this property ID, this listing ID, and then we would send that link to the booking.com place for them to go leave a review. And what we found by doing that on Booking and Vrbo and Airbnb, all the other channels, is we found that the customers were more likely to leave us a review when we asked them to do it versus the channel doing it, because the channel is seen as the booking engine, not the person or the thing that gave them the service and the experience they had. And so we did it in a way that said, we'll ask it on behalf of the channel because we want it to go to the channel and we want the reviews on the channel so that we can actually get better conversion, better strategy for our revenue management, onboarding and scale up and getting things going. And so I think there's a differentiation, right? Because like Airbnb, you have to like get the guest to leave a review and then you have to review the guest and everything else. Eventually, though, the review the guest leaves, if you don't review them, will show up on the listing. It just takes a longer time to get there. But I think that at the end of the day, the difference of the channels in that situation, the end of the day is if you ask guests for reviews, they're more likely to give it to you than if you just let the channels try to ask it. And at the end of the day, the channels want more reviews because they want properties that just convert well and showcase well and have great reviews and great things about it. So they can't ever really hate on you for trying best effort to do that, as long as you're pushing them back to leave it on the channel. So
I think you're telling some secret sauce. So if you guys haven't talked to Doug about this, talk, because he really figured a lot of it out. But you're pointing at something that's really important. I think if you're a consumer, a lot of people ask for reviews back. A lot of companies, I think we do but you're taking that all internally. And if you're a consumer, for me, you're lucky if I even leave you a review. I'm definitely not writing a review in 2 places. You know what I mean? And so early on, when VRBO was a listing site, so this isn't even applicable, but one of the first forays we had into this was when you went to leave a review on VRBO, it was just a link on the front. And what you did is you clicked it and you submitted it, and then it sent it to the email associated with your reservation to verify it. And so we were like, well, we're asking for all this internal feedback. Why don't we just take all the good reviews and we'll just submit it? And if they click, yes, I left that review, it'll go on the thing. And turns out everyone clicked yes. We would submit all the review information. They would get the email that was like, did you leave this review? It was their words. They sent it to us.
Yep.
And they just clicked yes. And our VRBO stuff exploded. Can't do that anymore.
No, you can't.
But, if you're taking reviews and you really need to optimize your channels, I don't know if you can do this on Airbnb. You can talk to Doug offline about this. But if you send them the review link to leave the review on the channel instead of your input, you can still gather that information, but you're going to much more increase the likelihood that that person's going to leave a review on that channel. And I think if you're in a situation where you're taking internal feedback, you're actually reducing the chance that they're going to leave you a review on the platform.
Yep.
Because if you're like me, I'm not telling you, you're lucky if I tell you once. I'm definitely not telling you twice.
No, you're not.
So Doug knows some great ways to automate sending that, identifying the reservation within the platform. Really, really, really helpful stuff. What are some other things that are maybe more manual that you have to do? Like if you're doing an initiative to drive reviews, what are some things that you can do to really drive that?
So I'll give you two other tips. One that I think was really surprising to us at the day when we found it out was, Expedia did this thing where they called it real-time feedback, and I think they still have it going. But basically, they'll actually send through the app or so you can send text messages if you opt into it to the client or to the guest staying while they're in stay. So they'd be like, "Hey, how are things going?" And it was quick, like, thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of on certain subjects, or like cleanliness was good, check-in was good, that kind of thing. And I think what we learned at Stay Alfred was if somebody checked into a stay and the check-in experience wasn't that great, or they checked in and there was like wrinkly sheets, right? Referencing what I said earlier. Well, what would happen is they would let that stuff fester in their mind all the way until they check out. And then when they are asked to leave a review, whether by us or by the channel, they're remembering all those bad things that happened because there wasn't any like troubleshooting or response or anything like that. So what we did is we created like an in-stay kind of like, how are things going? So we would actually send those kinds of communications to try and stimulate, because if we could fix or resolve or at least put our best effort at trying to help that situation while they were in stay, it had a dramatic effect to how reviews were being submitted afterwards when we asked them to leave a review. And they're probably more likely to leave us a review afterwards because they're like, wow, these guys were really on it. They were really helping us. They were really wanting to make the experience great for us. And I know a lot of key level listings out there in companies really do take a lot of passion in checking in with customers while they're in stay. So keep those kinds of things up and tag in with it, asking for the review afterwards from you by pushing into the channel. So I think that's like one of the biggest things that would be helpful at helping people leave better reviews.
That's a big one. I mean, any engagement during the stay where if you're just checking in like, hey, how are things going? It goes both ways. If someone's like complaining, you have an opportunity to fix it.
Yes.
But if someone gives you good feedback, it's just an opportunity for you to be like, hey, can you leave a review on the channel when you're done? It would really help us out.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're really doing an initiative, maybe you're offering an incentive for it too.
I think another piece too is everybody's got a direct site, right? Or at least they should have a direct site. What you should do is, try and take some of those positive feedbacks or reviews or things that you get and try to actually leverage that into what I was saying earlier, like case studies, like quotes, or like, tag them to things on your direct site property and say, from booking.com, somebody said, blah, 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 blah. It was a great place, best thing I ever had with my family, or, whatever that may be. But try and leverage some of that stuff to actually help the integrity of when people see stuff on your thing from your brand perspective. The other thing too is that when you get people to leave you negative feedback while they're in stay, you have a chance to address it and impact things going forward, but it also prevents them from going and leaving a negative review.
Yeah, we had some benefits at Stay Alfred where we went even further from sending, like once we figured out we could send them directly to the channel, we also started implementing some intermediary steps because we had some interaction with the apps and stuff that made it easy, but we could ask them how their stay was going, and that became like a switchboard, right? If they weren't having a good stay, that was directed to our guest services to make it better. If they were having a great stay, that was directed to the channel to leave a review. So that's like one layer on top of it. Can you talk a little bit about the CGO program? I know we'll probably run a little late today, but this is a really interesting topic that I think people will have a lot of fun.
Was amazing. I remember making memes and GIFs with your picture on it with the chief giver of opinion. That was so much fun.
Oh, I'm an opinionated guy.
I think you actually coined the phrase of CGO because we were talking about we need people to like give opinions and we need people to,
I think Jeannie coined me on it.
Did Jeannie? She coined you on it. Yeah, probably. Jeannie, if you ever see that, hello. But yeah, no. So chief giver of opinion, what we did is we said, hey, look, there's nothing illegal about what I'm about to tell you, everybody, that doesn't violate any policies of the OTAs or anything. What we did is we said, hey, how can we get more reviews in that 3-month time frame when we have a boost or whatever on our listings that are new? And the way we thought about it is like, okay, there's influencers out there. And we all know that most influencers out there are honest, true. They'll write a blog.
Can I interject right here too?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
We say influencers, but we don't just mean professional influencers.
Right.
These influencers were sometimes just guests that
stayed with us in the past,
stayed with us before, and we asked for their opinion. Yeah. So keep going.
We grabbed like loyalty guests. Like we're like, okay, this is a frequent flyer, right? They stay with us like 5-6 times at various different places. And it was like, hey, why don't you go stay with us at this property on your next travel and then leave us a review? Make sure you book through booking.com or Expedia. So we'd even push the channels because we knew the benefit of a stronger review presence on channels faster equaled more conversion and bookings for us later. And then we would work on our post-marketing game for future for direct at another point. But we'd use them as influencers. We'd use friends and family of influencers. We had lots of local staff that were around and said, hey, tell you what, we'll run a promotion, run a discount for this new property that came on, cheap rates. Why don't you have them come and stay for a 1 or 2 night stay and leave an true honest feedback on the property? Because remember, we said bad reviews are better than no reviews at all. Now, most of the time, we would hopefully expect that they would leave a good review because they were getting a discount and having a good time, and they were people friends of the company or whatever. But a lot of times, we got honest feedback, and we're like, "Hey, thanks. Wish you would have told us that when you checked in, but hey, whatever." But we would also use that as a way to help our joint like marketing efforts for SEO and stuff. Like we'd have some of these influencers that would travel people or whatever. And they'd stay there and they'd write a blog article, post it on their social media, post a review on the channel for us. And then they would post, a video or something and tag us in it. And it was just kind of like, it was a very interesting perspective that when you have a new listing, you can kind of take a loss on some things when you have a new listing just to get the reviews up and get the integrity up. Because my wife says it all the time, but she used to correlate it to like Amazon. Like if you're on Amazon and you're trying to buy a product, are you buying something that has 2 reviews at a 5-star? Or are you going to buy something that has 5,000 reviews at a 4-star? You're probably going to buy the 5,000 4-star review product just because you feel better about your purchase and you're more confident. And that's the same perspective, I think, for the vacation rental space. The more reviews at a higher score, the better. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, I thought our CGO program was really good. I do want to tell people, though, that even though, we worked with our reps to make sure we weren't crossing a line, you can cross the line.
You can, yes.
And especially if you have some people on your team who that line is a little blurrier, you can cross the line. So I just want to make people aware.
Biggest things to avoid crossing the line. Don't purchase anything for anybody. Just give them a link to the listing and say, hey, go buy it yourself and, go stay with us and let us know when you're staying so we can make sure and check in with you and see how things are going. Yeah. Don't purchase anything for them. Don't do that. That's a big no-no, right? And then also too, don't blatantly give them like free stays or anything like that. Have them pay for something. If you want to reimburse them for stuff, that's up to you. But I would encourage you just to say, hey, we'll set a promotion on the channel for a new listing and it's like 30% off. And then just go, hey guys, the rates are really low right now. Go buy the property for a 1-night stay and leave us your honest feedback and tell us how we did and see what you think.
Yeah. And I think, if you are offering incentives, this is done at hotels. You can go into a hotel and they'll give you money back for good stays. You can offer incentives, but don't purchase it for them. Do not tell them what to write. That was a big thing for us.
Yes, don't tell them what to write.
There is a situation which is kind of on that blurry side of the line where they do all this stuff, you reimburse them the money, and then you give them the review to post. That's pretty much on the verge of being wrong. I mean, I think if you're going to do something like this and you're going to ask for people's opinions, and especially if you're going to give them an incentive back to stay, you have to encourage them to leave their own feedback, and you do not influence it.
Well, there's an operational component to it too. I mean, you're not just looking to get the listing performing better. You're also testing out the staff and trying to make sure like, hey, is this property working for the staff, the housekeepers, the cleaners, the move-in people, the keyless entry, all the tech, everything else. I mean, when you get that listing live and you start having people wanting to check in, like you need to make sure you're operating on all 8 cylinders and it's working. Because I remember we had several times where we found out like there was like a check-in or arrival instructions that we had at a property where they put in the code for somebody, but they didn't put on the instructions hashtag in front of it. And hashtag was important in order to get the code. And so we had all these calls and bad reviews coming in from this property because people couldn't get into the property because they were punching the code, but they didn't have the hashtag part in front of it. So it's like, if you have a CGO or an influencer or a friends and family or somebody go do it, have them walk through the entire process and they'll find all the problems and let you know, and you can fix it before it happens to like real customers that are, like paying full price when you get your rates all the way in optimal scale.
Yeah, and I really was surprised, I think, in that program where, the friends and family, I think, is obvious. It's a little bit closer to the line when you're kind of generating that way. Influencers, that's a normal marketing thing, but again, it's a little closer to the line. I thought the most interesting aspect of ours was we went to our guest list. Particularly our return guest list. And we designed the program. We asked people specifically, hey, we're interested in getting feedback from our guests, real guests, when we have new properties. We told them specifically, when we're opening new properties, we'd like to give you guys the first opportunity to book. We'll give you not only a great rate for this stay, you got to pay for your own travel, but we'll also we'll give you credits towards future stays for staying with us and giving us feedback and leaving a review. So we built a policy of the rules so that we weren't going to cross the line. And then we basically allowed people to opt in, of which a lot of people opted in, which surprised us. And what we would do is when we were opening a new property, before we opened it, we would send out a thing and say like, hey, if you book between this time and this time, we'll give you 40% off and we'll give you a credit. You tell us if you're going to stay and we'll talk you through. Our marketing program kind of ran it, your team, and then you leave the feedback. We're not going to tell you what to write. And that was like really interesting and useful for review generation. And I think we did a pretty good job. We ran that by the booking.com particularly to make sure that they knew what we were doing. And they said that was okay. So just keep in mind, there's an opportunity to cross the line here. So you got to be careful, but there are things you can do, particularly when you're working through your relationships and you are in a position to really stick to what you know is right. I think most people have a pretty good idea what they know is right. When you're kind of crossing the line. You gotta let those people be in charge of a program like this.
and we had lots of those customers too that just told us, they're like, this is so great. I've never had a company value me so much. And it was something that was like, they were helping us out, but in turn, we were just investing more in them and saying, thanks for being a great customer for us. And the ironic part is that we were telling them to go to booking.com and to Expedia and Vrbo and Airbnb, where so many people in the industry, even mostly at the key level, are like, oh, I don't want to have them go to the OTA, book direct. And it's like, no, we want them to go book on the channel because we want to get the channels going and we want more coming out of it. But it was awesome to see people feel like they felt very valued from us as a company because of that.
Well, and that's kind of like the catch-22, or not maybe a catch-22, but for a revenue manager, it's like, on the long term, you want your guests to book with you direct.
Yeah.
But in order to get your guests to book with you direct, because none of us have the corporate budgets to do direct marketing, you need to develop your channels. Because the longer and more stable a channel is, the more often a guest is going to see that you're a legitimate property and consider booking on your site for the first time, or the second time they're definitely going to book on your site. So the long-term strategy there for revenue manager is you got to give up some on the front end, and you probably got to pay the piper. You got to keep paying the piper. Booking.com is going to delete your reviews. They're the biggest generator of new business anyway. You can't compete with that on your own marketing dollars.
No.
But your long-term play is that channel shift will inevitably, that share will shift to your cheaper channels, which is your direct.
I haven't looked at it recently, but for everybody's perspective and context who's still listening in, like the top 3 revenue streams at one point for Google was Booking Holdings, Expedia Group, and then Amazon. And that's because of the AdWords spend that those guys are doing and the marketing spend. I remember seeing one point at Expedia at the time, I think they're a lot less now, but at one point it was like they spent it was like $2 billion in one quarter just on like SEO and AdWords spend. And it was just like something ridiculous. That's like, okay, now if you take that and you're like, okay, Doug, well, there's millions of listings. But if you take that and you divide it across all the listings that they have and you come up with an average amount, it's like, okay, is that an amount that you would be willing to spend on one single listing for SEO? And you'd be like, hell no, there's no way that's going to happen. So, I mean, that's the perspective and context right there, and how much power those guys have with it.
Well, and they're also going to be spending on your specific listings. I remember really early on, we were like looking up our own stuff because we were talking about our SEO strategy. And it was like, what was the first, if you typed in the listing name for one of our listings, the first two AdWords spends were booking.com, VRBO, and then organically we're the first or second or third in the site. And so you can't really compete on that. But what's interesting is if your listing is good enough where they're going to spend AdWords on it because you've developed it, that means your listing's now showing up when someone types in not just the name of your listing, but when they type in Nashville, they're gonna advertise your listing for you. And then when people search for that listing or go on and put it into Google, you're still there. Your direct is there. So you get, by having a developed listing, you are going to be leveraging a lot more marketing spend than you would be willing to spend yourself. And then you just got to remember that you don't want to compete against them when they're doing that for you.
I think this could probably be a whole another episode and a topic about like SEO and the impacts of OTAs with regards to direct marketing, because I mean there is a major component to like a post-marketing strategy game where you take all the valuable bookings you get from the channels and you market to those customers afterwards and say, book with us direct next time. You know, I mean, I think we could do a whole episode on that. We probably should.
We probably should. We'll have to be careful about SEO. That's a really complicated subject. I can really spell it, honestly. All right. Well,
SEEOO.
Yeah, SESEEOH.
We should have like a guest speaker for it or something. Maybe it would help it. You know, I mean, like Adam Cronster or something like that, and have those guys come over and join on as a host.
That would be fun. Guest. Well, this has been a long one, so why don't we wrap it up?
Sounds good.
Doug, tell us a little bit about what you do. I'll tell you guys a little bit what I do, and then we'll see you later.
Yeah, so I am the head of revenue success at Rentals United. We are a channel manager, getting you connected all your properties to all the different OTAs. We have 60 plus channels, ranging from the big four all the way down to smaller, midterm, long-term type channels. But my role specifically is I really want to provide more transparency and education to the market. I've built a product called RU Data Studio and continually adding to that in the form of like distribution health cards, helping you get putting your best foot forward and finding the needle in the haystack, so to speak, on some of those efforts. So please reach out to us if you need some channel management advice or connections. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. My name's John DeRelay. I'm the Director of Enterprise Sales at Wheelhouse. If you haven't heard of Wheelhouse yet, you should come check us out at www.usewheelhouse.com. We are a revenue management platform and dynamic pricing algorithm. We're the only team that's published our research. We by far have the most interesting and accurate revenue algorithm in the space. And then we've coupled that with a platform that is super usable, is designed by revenue managers and experienced operators to make it easier for you to do what you need to do. So whether you're trying to do a set it and forget it revenue strategy, or you have a really high touch revenue organization, we're going to be able to provide accurate rate recommendations and give you the tools to customize that as much as you want. So give me a call. Would love to chat.
Love the set it and forget it. We need to get like the slap chop or the sleep pillow or something like that.
Yeah. I'm not a big set it and forget it guy. I'm a high touch revenue manager, but but you can do that. Yes. We're creating really good revenue. We're the only team with a bookings based model, so we're going to be able to give you accurate price recommendations. And then, for a high touch revenue manager like me, it's really easy to customize and make changes at a granular level and really push your properties up into the top 10 percentile all the time. One thing I think we want to cover, which we meant to cover at the beginning, but we didn't, is we're going to be at DARM. Doug said it earlier. If you're coming to DARM, reach out to us. We'd love to chat with you while you're there. I'll also be at VRMA. I imagine Doug will probably be there too. So as we go into convention season, there's probably going to be an opportunity to talk to us or our respective companies, and we would love to have a conversation. So,
yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Doug, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
You too.